How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Skyline Sports Podcast. I am Jack Hartman, joined by my good friend all the way over on the West Coast, Nick Norman. Nick, how we doing?
Doing pretty well this morning, Jack. It is the day before the NFL starts, so we're feeling it. Like, I don't think it's hit me quite yet. It's like tomorrow's football. Tomorrow's football that means something. Man, it's
Excited. I'm
it's it's
so freaking
jittery,
excited.
like you can feel it. It's oh man, it's the real deal. How are you
Yeah,
doing though, Jack?
man, I'm doing good. God is good. Yeah, classes are, we're in the full swing of things now.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's a lot that comes with that, but glad that I have other stuff to do, stuff like this, for example, where we just get to get on and talk and have a good time and talk about sports, man, and just man, I'm so amped for this weekend.
Yeah.
It's going to be insane.
Oh
It's
man.
going to be
And
legit.
this is the first time too, the only time we've been doing podcasts thus far is during the NFL off season and during NBA off season as well. So we haven't really been in season talking about some major sports, a little bit with baseball, but nothing too crazy yet. We're going to be getting into the swing of things, doing some predictions. This is the time to get excited, man. It is here, it is now.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah.
Everybody get ready for the next 3 or 4 months. Episodes are mostly going to be, this is mostly going to be an NFL podcast.
Yeah.
If crazy things happen here or there, we'll talk about it. But,
Yeah.
but for the most part,
Definitely.
we're just going to be centered around the NFL.
Yep. This has been a crazy off season though, I feel like. I feel like recently, at least for me, like this has been a really fun off season to me with all the movement in the NFL. And recently, of course, been doing some fantasy drafts and stuff. I was talking with you a little bit about that and some of the teams, some of the players you get. It's just one of those years where you just feel things in the off season are a little bit bigger here. And man, as a Steelers fan, personally, as a Steelers fan, this is the most interesting offseason we've had in a really long time with Kenny Pickett, man. He has looked like a baller as a rookie, and I know it's just the preseason, and he's not the starter, but he's not the third stringer. We don't have any clerical errors on this show. So really exciting though. I'm looking forward to some Kenny Pickett time this season at some point.
Yeah. I mean, from what everybody's saying, it's just a matter of when. So
Yep. Yep.
I personally, I am of the firm belief that you draft a rookie quarterback and you don't make him your starting quarterback until his second season. Just you give him a chance to to see what it's like, learn from somebody ahead of them. And most times, though it's different with the Steelers, they got him late in the first round.
Mhm.
Most times you look at teams like with the Bengals with Joe Burrow and the Chargers with Justin Herbert. If you're drafting a guy of that caliber, it
Mhm.
means that you have a really early pick, and it means you have a really bad team if you have a pick that early. So why would you take a generational talent at quarterback and put him in the game and expect him to lead your team to the playoffs in his rookie year when he has nobody around him to help him? Um,
Mhm.
but this with the Steelers, this is different because they do have a really good team around him. They got him late, which means that they've already got a good structure around him. So
Mhm.
I wouldn't hate, I wouldn't think it would be a bad idea if the Steelers put him in,
Yeah.
starting like week 11, week 12,
Yeah. It's just
and
our
give him the
offensive
reins.
line is Swiss cheese a little bit, man. That's something, of course, that this preseason has shown more evidently than Kenny Pickett shining has been our ability to not protect our QBs. So Mitch
Yeah,
Trubisky is going to soak up some hits this season.
yeah,
And
that's for sure.
of course, you being a Browns fan, me being a Steelers fan, this season has excitement looking into it for some different reasons. And man, the future looks bright, I feel like, though.
Yeah,
But as far as this season, we got a little bit of record predictions, a little bit of who's going to win the Super Bowl, a little bit of some teams that we view are some shocking teams in the NFL. So, Jack, any particular teams that you have in mind as far as teams that you think are going to shock some people this year?
I do, man. There's some teams that really got better this offseason. Teams that are typically like bad that got a lot better. Some of them are getting more notoriety than others. A lot of people are talking about the Jaguars, how good they've looked in the preseason, how Trevor Lawrence has really started to look like his own. I know specifically watching the Browns Jaguars preseason game. getting to see Travis Etienne, and he looks electric. I mean, he looks like he is what everybody wants Christian McCaffrey to be, but hopefully Etienne stays healthy. I mean, he looks just as fast and dominant as he did at Clemson a few seasons ago, and you can already tell that the rapport that Lawrence and Etienne had together at Clemson is going to come through. But there are some other teams, man, that people aren't really talking about. That I think are gonna surprise some people. And one of them for me is actually the Houston Texans. Everybody is talking about the Texans like they're going to be the worst team in the NFL this year, and they very much could. I think that the Texans have as low of a floor as everybody's acting, but I don't think people are giving them enough credit for a higher ceiling that they might have. Davis Mills looked like more of a legitimate quarterback than we expected last year. And I think that they surprisingly, the Texans did a good job developing a quarterback in him last year a little bit. And I'm looking forward to seeing how that continues. Their offensive line is under the radar. They've got some studs on the O-line. Obviously you've got like guys like Laramie Tunzel, but just everybody. They've got good guys at the offensive line. They have Brandon Cooks, who has like 7 straight seasons of 1,000 receiving yards. Something like, just again, really under the radar that you don't really notice. I am really, really bullish on the running back that they took out of Florida, Dameon Pierce.
Yes.
I think
love it.
I get Breece Hall. I get Jerome Ford. I get Kenneth Walker III. But man, I think, or not Jerome Ford, James Cook. But I think that Dameon Pierce could very well be the best running back in this draft class.
Year one, I think at the very least easily, because I think he's going to get the most touches because he is clearly running back one in that offense. It seems like they got rid of all the other running backs on that team, threw him down the depth chart. Marlon Mack, who's a legitimate starter, he's rushed for 1,000 yards on the Colts before, and they put him on the practice squad. They said, Pierce, he's that dude. He's a rookie, but he can run really well behind this offensive line, picking up 8-yard, 10-yard chunks pretty consistently. He was running very well in the preseason, and he looks to be running with power and speed and some quickness. He seems like he's a really good mix, though, of what you want from a modern running back. Take out a little bit of the passing game. He can build on that. We haven't seen that quite yet. But man, he looks to be a full-on package kind of running back. He's got all the tools to be able to be that guy.
Yeah. I think that that people are not giving their offense as much credit as they deserve. They're obviously, like, their defense has some huge question marks. And I totally get that. Like, I mean, one, there's the question mark of them drafting Derek Stingley with the number 3 overall pick. I think that Derek Stingley is a great defensive back, but when you have Sauce Gardner still on the board and you take Derek Stingley Jr., that's going to raise some eyebrows. But I could really, really see the Texans winning some games, with final scores of like 38-35 or 45-42, winning some like, Big 12 style football where the defense never leaves the locker room and you just have these offenses that show up. And the only time stops happen is because a guy drops a pass. Right. Yeah. So, but I think, there's a very strong chance that the Texans go 0-17. Like, I'm not going to act like that isn't a possibility, but I don't think people are giving them enough credit, and I could see them winning 6 or 7 ball games, especially in a very, very interesting and tenuous AFC South at the moment.
Definitely. I can definitely get behind that, though, Jack. I believe my prediction for them in the upcoming year is them going 5-12, I believe. Yeah, I have them going 5-12. But man, I feel like that'd be an improvement as far as just solidifying who they are. I know last year they went 4-13, so it's 1 game better. But man, I feel like they won some random games where it was against the Chargers with the Chargers' bad special teams making random mistakes, or with the wacky coaching decisions of Brandon Staley. But I think that there's the stability and the veteran presence on the Texans that makes them viable to not go like the 0-16 of the Browns of 2017, where that was
Right.
because of a lack of veteran presence and leadership and just knowing how to right the ship when you've gone 0-3 to start the year, when you've had a losing streak here and there. To be able to right the ship despite that, you need those veteran guys. And I think that the Texans have those to where even when they lose for long stretches in the year, they're going to be able to win a couple of these games this year, I think.
Yeah, dude, totally. What's so that's my big one. There are a couple others, but what's one that you're really thinking about?
Man, I have been crushing on the Lions.
Yup.
They're my NFL crush right now, man. I predicted every single game this year and all of it coming out. I had the Lions finishing 9-8 with a winning record this year, and it's just one of those things where I'm like, they played the NFC North close last year where they were in games tight with Green Bay. They were in
Hmm.
games with the Vikings and with the Bears. They have real shots to win those games against the Bears. But man, it was the game against the Steelers that I watched every single play of that I feel like really solidified it for me. That offensive line is a top 3 line in the league that I feel like people are just like, oh, it's a good line. Their tackle combination, their
Oh my
center
gosh.
guard combination,
Seriously.
Pro Bowl guard, Pro Bowl center, and 2 potential Pro Bowl level tackles. When
Yup.
your worst lineman is Halapuli Vaitai, and he's a really solid player too. It's like, man, this is the 2017 Eagles offensive line. This is
Yeah.
the Cowboys 2016 offensive line, where it's literally just like, oh, everybody on this line is either a Pro Bowler or has the potential to be a Pro Bowler. Like it's
Yep.
one of those. And man, they have weapons that are really interesting. Where DeAndre Swift, Amon-Ra St. Brown, TJ Hawkinson, and you add into that DJ Chark, under the radar free agent who's had a
Hmm.
1,000-yard season and is a really skilled receiver. And man, then you add into that Jameson Williams out of Alabama. I know he's likely not going to play for at least the first couple of weeks of the season. Not really sure when he's coming back. But man, so many people I heard said this is the best receiver in the draft. He gets open, he flies past people. This is the best receiver in the draft. And
Yep.
getting him at 12 or 13, wherever they got him at, man, you have a receiving core that's interesting, a tight end that's really good, an offensive line that's great, a running back core with Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift that's really good. And Jared Goff isn't a bum. Like behind a good
No.
offensive line, he's a really solid quarterback. With the
He's
Rams, the reason that he made it to the Super Bowl was great offensive line, giving him time to throw a really pretty deep ball. Where the only
right.
reason we think of him as the goofball is he's trying to run away from pressure and throw a ball up, twisting around, and throws an ugly interception. That's not who he is to be successful. Who he is drop back, fire a ball downfield. And he has a receiving core and an offensive line to let him do that, where their offense is going to be in these games. And on top of that, Aiden Hutchinson. That man looks to be a culture changer, just an awesome guy, and a great player.
Yep.
Man, at number 2, we could be saying he was a steal at number 2 in the draft, which is crazy to say. I don't know that that's the case because I think the number 1 pick also, Walker, seems to be having a really good preseason and has all those tools too. But man, it's going to be a really it's the first time I feel like that Detroit feels like it has a team more than just horrendous team and a couple of superstars with Ndamukong Suh or Megatron or Matt Stafford and a horrible team around them. It's just
Right.
a couple of guys and terrible team around it. This feels like a team with not a ton of stars, but team, which I feel like is different for Detroit.
Yeah. Dude, I'm totally with you. I'm also 100%
Mm-hmm.
on the Detroit Lions hype train. I've adopted them as my NFC team.
Mm-hmm.
And with the decisions the Browns have been making lately that I really don't like, if things keep trending in the direction that they are, I could see myself being a full-fledged Lions fan here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, hope, hopefully for lots of different reasons that never needs to be the case. But anyway, I'm
Right.
totally with you there. Um, Yeah, I mean it's really really fascinating just to
Hmm.
see the culture change that has come with Dan Campbell. Like I
Hmm.
remember making fun of him about like biting people's kneecaps and stuff like that. But
Yep.
you watch you see the emotion. Like the remember there were a couple of games that he cried in the press conference
Hmm.
after because they were
Yep.
so close and because
Yep.
he has given his heart and soul to the team, and that is
Hmm.
just huge in that locker room.
Hmm.
You can tell when you watch Hard Knocks and the way that like they respect him and the way
Hmm.
that they will run through a freaking wall if he
Hmm.
tells them to. And
Hmm.
yeah, I'm bullish on the Lions as well, especially with the way that the AFC North looks moving forward. The Bears are a disgrace to the legend that has been that franchise.
Yep.
Um, the Vikings look like they could be the best team in the division, but at the same time, they have Kirk Cousins as their quarterback, so who knows what could happen. Uh,
Hmm.
Aaron Rodgers is doing hallucinogens, so who even knows what's going to happen in that division? But
Hmm.
but the Lions, for the first time, I feel like truly are trending in the right direction.
Hmm.
And I love that they didn't draft a quarterback this last year.
Hmm.
I love that they were, that like I had talked about earlier about teams drafting a quarterback because they have a high draft choice and immediately putting him in. Like they were like, you know what? None of the guys in this draft are worth a top 15 pick. And so we'll let it go. If we get to the third round and Matt Corral's available, then great. He wasn't, so whatever.
Hmm.
We'll just next year they're going to be great quarterbacks coming out of the draft, and we're going to have a solid thing to plug those guys into.
Right.
So yeah, I'm right with you there on the Lions for sure.
Definitely. Any other teams that you like? To me, I feel like the teams that we could consider like sleepers, as far as like teams that are kind of unheralded or teams that were out of the playoffs that could be in the playoffs this year. I feel like the teams that didn't make the playoffs last year are so much more interesting than they normally are, where like the Chargers or the Broncos in the AFC West, that division is so competitive where all four of those teams could make the playoffs, could win a Super
Hmm.
Bowl, and I feel like nobody would be shocked, where it's like none of these are shocking teams because all of them, even though two of them made the playoffs last year, two didn't, everybody thinks all four of them could be great teams to where it's like, well, none of it's going to be surprising if any of them went 13-4 or any of them went 10-7 or anything in between. Like
Right.
everybody will be like, oh yeah, they were all great teams. But it's like, man, the Raiders, the Broncos, the Chargers, the Chiefs have been that dude, but all those teams I feel like have a real shot to make some real impact. Maybe not in a shocking way because we're paying so much attention to it, but
Right.
man, that division has a ton of good teams.
Yeah, I'm totally with you there. One thing, and maybe my own bias is coming into this, but I've been really, really surprised at how much the Cleveland Browns stock has just dropped in terms of how good they
Mhm,
are as a football team. Obviously,
mhm,
it's dropped for the obvious reasons, but in terms of how good this team is. Like, yes, they do not have Deshaun Watson, who the last we saw him playing, he was a top five quarterback in the NFL, no doubt about it. They're not going to have him for the first, 11 or 12 games of the season. Fine. However,
mhm,
they still have an insane roster outside of that position. I mean, they have, you could argue, one of the best, 1-2 tandems at edge rusher in
mhm,
Jadeveon Clowney and Miles Garrett. They have, a solid linebacker core with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah and
mhm,
Anthony Walker. They
mhm,
have some of the most athletic and skilled DBs in the game. In Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, John Johnson, right? And then on offense, they still have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt.
mhm,
They have Amari Cooper.
mhm,
Donovan Peoples-Jones had really good seasons when OBJ and Jarvis Landry was there because he wasn't the number one option. After those guys were gone, he wasn't so good because
mhm,
that was the only guy that teams had to worry about. But he's
mhm,
still solid. I mean, the wide receiver that they drafted, I mean, he didn't drop a pass in camp
mhm,
until day 5 or something like that. I mean, David Njoku, the Browns have a really, really good roster outside, beside Deshaun Watson,
Mhm.
and Jacoby Brissett is no pushover.
Mhm.
Like I'm just saying that I think everybody is. I mean, I think you texted it to me. This somebody predicted the Browns to go 5-12 this year, and I just think that's ludicrous. Like
Yeah.
even with Deshaun Watson out, like we're playing the AFC East.
Mhm.
We're playing the NFC South, the NFC South.
Mhm.
Um, so like you have Atlanta there.
Right. The
I'm
Panthers,
excited.
Atlanta. Yeah.
Like like I'm just I think people are counting the Browns out too much.
Mhm.
Do I think that they might still make the playoffs? I don't know. But
Mhm.
to act like that they aren't going to come close to a winning record, I just think is kind of insane.
Right. 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 And when I did all of my just going through all the games, predicting them all, it came out for me the Browns were like the number that came for me was 7-10 for the Browns. And to me, I was like, wow, I feel like the Browns are a game or two better than that. Where I'm like, the Browns really 7-10? I don't know. And the more that I thought about it, the more I was just like, man, this is not a testament against the Browns. It's just, man, the AFC is really good. There just aren't a lot of wins there when it's like you're playing the Steelers and the Ravens and the Bengals, and you're playing the Bills and you're playing the Patriots and you're playing the Buccaneers and you're playing teams like the Chargers, the Chiefs, the Colts. It's like there just aren't a
The
lot of wins
the
there where,
Dolphins,
yeah, the Dolphins, I feel like people are like, oh yeah, they're the Dolphins, but it's like Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. This offensive line's improved. The running game's going to be pretty dang good. The defense is
yeah,
still really good. This is going to be a baby version, I feel like, of the Niners a couple years ago. Jimmy Garoppolo's second, I guess, year, the year after he tore his ACL, where it's like, man, they got some offensive talent and their defense is going to be really good and the scheme's going to be really good. Where you might not be like, ah, Tua's the man, but this team's going to be really interesting. This team has a lot of weapons, a lot of tools. And it's like, oh, will the Dolphins make the playoffs? I don't know. And they're a really good team that people are like, I don't know if they'll make the playoffs. They could
yeah,
easily be a number 6 seed, could make the playoffs, but could easily be like a number 10, 11 seed and be passed up
right,
by a bunch of guys. Not because they're a bad team, but they're just a ton of good teams in the AFC. Just so much depth there.
yeah, yeah. No, I'm with you there. It'll be. I mean, it's gonna be interesting to just see the end of the season
Mhm.
when teams are they start putting up the graphic with the playoff pictures of who's
Mhm.
in the wild card spots, who's in the hunt and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we're going to see we could see the 4 division winners, 3 wild card, and still see like 5 teams in the hunt on the
Exactly.
AFC side.
Right.
And we could see, a team that's like, yeah, that has like a 10-7 record miss the playoffs in the
Mhm.
AFC, and then look at the NFC playoff picture, and the last team that gets in is like,
Yep.
7-8-1 or 7-9-1. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So yeah, we're the AFC is eons ahead of the NFC right now.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, it's been long since that was the case the other way around. So
Mhm.
so this is just where we're fluctuated to right now.
Yeah.
But
And I had it to where all four of the teams in the AFC West I have making the playoffs, with the worst team being the Broncos and the Raiders tied at 11-6. Them knocking the Steelers and Bengals out of the playoff picture, both of them at 10-7, just because the whole entire AFC West is above 10 wins. That's how ridiculous the league is, I feel like, where this is
yeah,
on the table. It's it's crazy, crazy though.
yeah. But moving into it, we were just sort of talking about, playoffs and stuff like that. And let's just put it out there. It is Wednesday, September 7th. Games have not happened yet. And yeah, I mean, let's just talk. Let's just put it out there what we think our Super Bowl predictions are going to be. So Nick, what are you thinking? Who's representing the AFC? Who's representing the NFC? And who do you have winning it all?
Man, for me, I feel like so much of the money, if you look at Super Bowl odds at basically all the major betting outlets, the betting favorite for everybody is the Bills. And that's just crazy, crazy to me. The Bills, I know, are a really good team, and Josh Allen is a top two quarterback in the league. Him and Patrick Mahomes easily just their skill set, their age, their talent, it's absurd. But man, I don't feel like the Bills are that guy when it comes to the Super Bowl. Because if you actually look at the off-season additions, I feel like as far as impact players, I feel like it's Von Miller, and their draft to me wasn't that impressive. And
Hmm.
their other off-season additions to me just don't really move the needle that much. There aren't really any receivers to me that make a big deal. Jamison Crowder's a good slot receiver, but is he really going to change it up to where you beat the Chiefs this time? I don't think so. Any real key defensive pieces, it's like, okay, Von Miller, but Von Miller was able to be Von Miller because he was next to Aaron Donald on the Rams. So for me, I feel like the Bills are a really good team. But to me, I feel like the Chiefs, who beat them last year, are still actually better. I feel like trading Tyreek Hill, despite that, I feel like this Chiefs defense is going to be the best Chiefs defense Patrick Mahomes has ever had. I think this is going to be a very good defense. And so I have the Chiefs representing the AFC this year. I know people are going to say, oh man, without Tyreek Hill, what's the offense going to be? The defense is just full of young guys. They couldn't even beat the Bengals, and the Bengals had no offensive line and had all these problems. But to me, I feel like the defensive additions in the drafting, man, the Chiefs know how to draft. I feel like you see them in the 6th and 7th round get offensive linemen that had first round quality talent that just dropped for random medical reasons. And I feel like, man, they just have drafted so well, made a lot of key free agent moves. Their offensive line is really, really good. Their defensive line is going to be good. So I have the Chiefs coming out of the AFC right now. And for me, I'm just really reluctant with the NFC because I feel like there's not a really dominant team in the NFC. But right now, I have it being the San Francisco, or not San Francisco. I was thinking about them for a moment because they have a shot. I actually have the Buccaneers coming out of the NFC, so it's going to be a Super Bowl matchup from 2 years ago of the Bucks versus the Chiefs. And man, to me, I feel like everybody, the headline topic for the Buccaneers right now is Tom Brady behind this offensive line. The interior offensive line has been so injured. People are gone. Shaq Mason was switched in for Alex Kappa. Man, the interior offensive line. And I just looked at the NFC, and really, it's Aaron Donald and a bunch of not great defensive tackles that I saw in the conference. It was Aaron Donald, and then you look at like the Eagles with a older, really less effective Fletcher Cox if you look at him the last year or two. And I get that you have some of the rookies, some of the younger guys with Javon Hargrave on the Eagles. But in the bracket that I laid out when doing my win predictions, I had the Buccaneers running into like the Packers and teams like the 49ers that neither of those teams really have that elite interior presence to be able to make Tom Brady feel that pressure. I really respect Kenny Clark as a defensive tackle, but he hasn't shown to me that he's going to be that guy to ruin Tom Brady's life to where it's like, oh, they're not going to be able to do anything about it. I feel like to me, if there was that Aaron Donald that, like, I know Aaron Donald's in the NFC, but I'm less high on the Rams than I've ever been as far as the last couple of years, just because I think the Andrew Whitworth retirement's going to be a big deal. And I think their offense isn't going to be quite as smooth because of that. And Matt Stafford's elbow issue that he's had recently, I think, is notable. I don't know that it's going to hold him out of any games this year, but I just feel that this offense is going to look a lot less smooth, even with their running back, what's his name, out of Florida State, who tore his Achilles last year. You know who I'm talking about. But even with their running back core being pretty dang good, I just feel like the offense isn't going to move quite as well with the Andrew Whitworth retirement. And Ja'Marr Chase just so exposed Jalen Ramsey in the Super Bowl, where I'm like, man, I love Jalen Ramsey, the player, as far as the trash talking's fun. And I think he's easily, to me, the most overall talented corner in the league as far as a size, speed, physicality, tackling, coverage perspective. And Jamar Chase just completely turned his world upside down. And I think Jamar Chase is fantastic. But man, I'm a little hesitant with this defense. No Von Miller, Aaron Donald, a year older, to where I don't think the Rams are going to be a major player. So I went with the Buccaneers versus the Chiefs. And I have the Chiefs winning it this time around with the Buccaneers pass rush presence not being able to do anything as much against this offensive line.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Very, very interesting. I cannot say that I agree with any of that.
Okay.
Um, I think that you make a good point about who the defensive tackles are in the NFC that are going to cause Brady issues. But it's been shown in Brady's career that if there is any bit of concern in that middle in the pocket,
Mhm.
that things go south. So
Mhm.
I mean, and with like, it's not just small question marks at the interior of their line; those are large question marks at the interior of their line. So I mean, I could see, yeah, a random guy that we haven't really talked about just really, really make life difficult for Tom Brady.
Mhm.
Also, I mean, I don't want to be one to speculate either about what's going on off the field with him, because
That's
that's not for us to talk about. But if there is something off the field going on with him, that could considerably affect what's going on the field.
that's
Um,
true. And even if
so
he's on the Masked Singer, we don't know how that's going to affect him. We don't
Very,
know.
very
We
true.
don't
Very
know.
true. But when it comes to the NFC, I look at the main players of the last few years, the usual suspects,
Hmm.
and everybody's taken a step backwards.
Hmm.
I think the
100%.
NFC I think the NFC is wide open. I
Hmm.
mean, I think that there's a chance we're looking at the NFC North and the Packers might not be representing that division in the playoffs.
Hmm.
We look at the NFC South and I have some concerns about the Saints offensive line
Hmm.
and what Jameis are we going to get, but they've got a good ball club, like regardless, just in
Hmm.
general, they have a good ball club. And if those question marks are answered, and if Jameis is playing like he
Hmm.
looked like last year before he got injured, the Saints could be representing the NFC South,
Hmm.
right? And you
True.
look at the NFC West, that I mean, the Seahawks are abysmal,
Hmm.
but who knows? Maybe Cliff Kingsbury can keep Kyler Murray together for a full season. Not
Hmm.
just through October. Um, you look at the Niners, and that's why people are talking about Trey Lance being an MVP, candidate, and the Niners possibly representing the NFC West, just because the Rams also took steps backwards. So I see the NFC as wide open, like as wide open as
100%.
it could be. That being said, I think that the Rams have on paper right now the best shot. Given that, yes, I think you're right that Stafford's elbow is worth mentioning. Don't like 100% on board with
Hmm.
that. Um, but nonetheless, he's still that dude, and he showed he was that dude last year.
Hmm.
You look at, I mean, they have the best wide receiver in football, depending on
Hmm.
who you ask, in Cooper Cup, right? They have Cam Akers at running back.
Hmm.
They've got dudes there. The offensive line, yeah, they lost Whitworth, but I think that they can make it work. I trust Sean McVay, I really
Hmm.
do. Their defense, I mean, they like Aaron Donald is just a menace.
Hmm.
Like, it's insane. Yeah, Jalen Ramsey did not look, great in that Super Bowl, but
Hmm.
is he might not have to face Jamar Chase until the Super Bowl potentially. You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Yeah,
And
I know what
especially in like we were talking about the disparity between the NFC and the AFC. I look at the wide receivers that Ramsey's going to have to cover,
you mean.
and it's not going to be as significant. So I
I
do
get
I
that.
do like the Rams. I like the Rams, but I could see anybody.
Hmm.
Um, maybe not anybody. I'm
Yeah.
not. It's not going to be the Bears. It's not going to be the Washington football team or the New York Giants.
Mhm.
Um, I feel safe saying it's not going to
Eagles,
be the
Eagles are
Cowboys.
Eagles are interesting, man. They're the team that I feel like everybody's like, man, the offseason additions, the draft additions to the defense.
The
Man, they're
Eagles.
a really talented ball club, man. They're really talented.
I feel like the Eagles and the Dolphins are very, very similar in that they are as good or as bad as their quarterback makes them. And we'll see. And this is the year that is put up or shut up for those quarterbacks.
Mhm,
But yeah, I mean, I think the NFC is wide open, but
mhm,
my pick would be the Rams to come out right now, and we'll see. If
mhm.
Stafford is sidelined for 6 to 8 weeks because of his elbow, then that definitely changes things.
Mhm.
Not even. I mean, I'm not gonna act like no, they'll be fine even if he
Yeah,
is, because I think Josh Wolford is their backup or whatever his name is.
yeah.
So, but the AFC, I hear what you're saying, but I don't know. I don't see a better team than the Bills in the AFC. I just don't. I think Josh Allen is that dude. I think you should. Well, you said it. I think between quarterbacks in the NFL, it's 1A, 1B with him and
Yeah,
Mahomes, and
yeah.
depending on the week, it changes who's in there. I
Depending
mean,
on 13 seconds, it changes.
right. I mean, he went toe to toe with Mahomes and arguably played better throughout the game than Mahomes
Mhm,
did. Mahomes just
mhm,
got a chance to get the ball one last time. You
mhm.
know, yeah, you talk about like Jamison Crowder compared to like Emmanuel Sanders. That's really a lateral move. But they do have Gabriel Davis, who
Mhm.
nobody saw coming, and it's the reason why he went crazy in that game
Yep.
against the Chiefs. That's another guy that they've got to worry about. They wrapped up Dawson Knox for a
Mhm.
while.
They did.
I really like the draft pick of James Cook for running back. They haven't had a
True.
running back, but he feels like a guy that can alleviate pressure to get
Mhm,
3 or 4 yards when you need to from Josh Allen, and
mhm,
it makes Josh Allen a little more sustainable.
mhm.
As throughout the year. Um, I look at that game against the Chiefs, and they didn't have Tre'Davious White. I
True.
mean, that's
Very true.
that's like one guy, but it's worth mentioning because he's a
Mhm,
box office defensive back.
mhm,
When I think about the Chiefs, I don't think that the Chiefs get worse because they lose Tyreek Hill, but I think that they get more playable because they lose Tyreek Hill. And I say that because I think about
mhm,
2 years ago when the Browns went to Arrowhead to play them in the
mhm.
divisional game. And they lost because on 4th and 1, the Chiefs went for it, and they had that little
The Chad
dumpy
Henne.
tire.
Yep,
Yeah,
Chad
they have
Henne.
that. They have that little dumpy route that they love to run with Tyreek Hill doing that
Mhm,
like 3 yard out, and they
mhm,
just have that and have that and have that. And the reason that it works every time is just because he is that good and he's that much faster. You can't line
mhm,
up in a way that covers that.
mhm,
They run these huge deep crossing routes that you just can't have a defense alignment to keep that from happening on the
mhm,
backside because he's too fast. You blink and he's on the other side of the field. I
mhm,
so I think not that the Chiefs get worse because they lose Tyreek Hill, but just they get a little more playable on defense where that stuff, the meme when it's like F it, Tyreek's down there somewhere and
Yep.
Mahomes just
Yep.
throws it. He's not gonna have
Man.
that. He's not gonna have that bailout. And he's
Yep.
admitted that. And I think that this year will be a really good learning experience for him. And I think coming out of it, there will be nobody touching him in terms of best quarterback in the NFL because it'll take 1 year for him to figure out what do we do now, and he will just go
Mhm.
nuts. But I think
100%.
but I think this year is just it's gonna take a little bit. And I really really like the Bills as an all around team. I think Bart Scott said on Get Up, championship teams have to suffer, and
Mhm.
the Bills have suffered.
Yeah.
Here these
Yeah.
last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I think it's finally the Bills' time. And right now, I would have the Bills beating the Rams in the Super Bowl. I
Man.
just think
Wow.
I just think the Bills. I see a lot of similarity in terms of talent, like in terms of specific spots that there's talent. You have
Mhm.
the Bills who have Tre'Davious White and the Rams who have Jalen Ramsey, right? You have the Bills who have Josh Allen. You have the Rams who have Matt Stafford. You know,
Mhm.
their running back situation is similar. They both have guys that are going to be good, get you some scrappy yards, but aren't, you know, your Christian McCaffreys or your Alvin Kamara's, you know.
Mhm.
But the Bills are younger, and I trust
Mhm.
their longevity a little more. So my pick is Bills over Rams in the Super Bowl. I know that's really generic, and that's what a lot of people are saying, but I mean they're saying it
Yeah.
for good reason.
And start it
And
how you end the year. That's the opening game tomorrow night. It's Bills Rams in LA. That's if that's what happens, that's going to be crazy, crazy. But man, Aaron Donald against that Bills offensive line, that Bills interior offensive line can get some pressure on it. My big issue right now with the Bills is as far as defensive players, personally, I feel like the box office guy is Tre'Davious White, but all their other really high end defenders are on the older side,
mm,
where it's Von Miller, who's 33 years old. Both of their safeties are over 30 years old, where I just feel that personally, in this next year, in this next 2 years, you're really going to see a decline in that safety play. And Von Miller is going to be a declining asset at this point, to where I feel like it's going to be Tre'Davious White, Tremaine Edmonds, some other of those defensive line players, but it's not a lot of great defense. Where last year they were the number one ranked defense, and that was a little bit of smoke and mirrors with them playing a lot of terrible teams last year with like the Jets offense and the
right.
Patriots offense and the Dolphins offense, where it's like the teams like played against you, but you were feasting on the poor and you were really padding your stats defensively to where I just feel that that defense against Mahomes, even without Tyreek's going to be interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I looking here at the Bills depth chart defensively. I mean, their linebacker position is like not bad. I mean, Matt
Mhm.
Milano,
I
Tremaine
agree.
Edmonds, and Von Miller is solid. Um, you know, they um yeah, I mean, I defensive, yeah, Tre'Davious White, but you know, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, you know,
Mhm.
those are solid dudes. Um,
Mhm.
and one of the guys that was the biggest surprises to me of the draft from a couple years ago was
Oh,
Greg Rousseau,
oh yeah,
um,
yeah, yeah.
who the Bills took, and I was surprised when they took him. I was like, oh, I don't know about that pick, but
Mhm.
he's looked solid.
He played
So
well last year. I agree. But
so I mean
Kyer
we'll
Elam
see.
hasn't seemed great as far as what you've heard out of camp. I feel that he's more of a man corner and a more zone-ish heavy scheme, but it'll be interesting. I think that they're one of those teams that they have a couple of defensive players that you really know who they are. But I feel like they have a lot of untapped talent on defense that if we see Greg Rousseau or Kyer Elam or one of these defensive tackles or defensive ends actually like show up, you're going to have a breakout defensive player that could put this defense over the top. I just don't know who it is or like
Yeah,
what's going to happen with that. But I definitely agree with you that it could happen, that the Bills defense does have some of that.
yeah.
Cool. Well, to wrap it up as far as this podcast, we were so I was so just talking with you a little bit earlier, we were discussing a little bit of the award predictions for this year and so talking
Hmm.
about MVP, offensive player, defensive player. For you, as far as MVP, who do you think is your favorite, your guy, and any particular guys that you think have a real shot that maybe haven't won an MVP before? So take out like Mahomes or Lamar or anything like that.
Right.
Your guy, and then anybody else who you think is a real player in this.
Yeah. Both of my guys that I think are real players are both players that haven't won it before.
Mm,
And they're both quarterbacks out of this loaded AFC. And those
yep.
two are Josh Allen and Justin Herbert. And
Oh,
those are very, very popular picks by a lot of people. And I think it's for good reason. Josh Allen
mhm,
has looked, I mean, he's just kept getting better.
mhm,
And I think that we are near that point where he's just finally gonna do it.
mhm,
Um in yeah, and he's in a good division to do it because he will be going up against, you know, some of the dicey defenses of the AFC.
Mhm.
Not only within the division, but cross division play who they're going to be playing against.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, he shows the skills
Mhm.
of a good dual threat quarterback that, you know, can do it. And Justin Herbert, he is just too good. He
Yeah.
is just too freaking good. I
Mhm.
I was one of the few people, like, going into that draft, that I thought that he was better than Tua and that he should have gotten
Mhm.
drafted ahead of Tua. And I'm not going to say I told you so, because everybody's hindsight is 2020, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah.
And you know, I said that then thinking more about Tua's injury problems, not
Mhm.
necessarily how good of a player he is. But he just, his deep ball is just immaculate, in power, but also precision. He is the I mean, the significant drop off in trying to do too much mistakes from his rookie year to last year alone was just, like, insane. Like, you don't see young guys grow that much that fast. And I
Mhm.
think it's only going to continue. I think the only thing that could, I mean, they keep building the roster around him. They keep going and getting offensive linemen to protect him.
Mhm.
And he's got Austin Eckler, who might be, because Christian McCaffrey isn't always healthy, the overall best receiving back in the NFL.
Mhm.
He's got a great 1-2 tandem in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm a really, really big believer in Justin Herbert.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I said that I think the Bills are gonna, you know, win the Super Bowl. I could see the Chargers being there instead. Like, I really can. I mean, it's really going to come down to Brandon Staley and what he does and doesn't do.
Mhm. Yep.
And but I mean, Herbert has all the skills to do it.
Yep.
So those are my two.
100%, man. And to me, if you actually look at the player and if they had on same uniform, same helmet, you're just looking at the back of the jersey, the front of the jersey, like you gray out their face. To me, they're the same dude. Big, strong, can move. Like if you literally grayed out everything, ripped off the names on the back of their jerseys, they do the same things on the field. They're just so big, so strong, throw such great balls. The
Yeah.
only thing is that like Josh Allen right now we view as like 1A, 1B type quarterback in the league. Justin Herbert has been at the level Josh Allen's been at more or less, but from the get-go. From
Right.
the get-go, Justin Herbert as a rookie, his second year, he didn't need that time to develop with like Josh Allen. He had the spotty little bit of like, oh, his accuracy, throwing interceptions, a little bit of the goofy rookie
Yeah.
second year type play. Justin Herbert went from drafted, Tyrod Taylor gets a needle right in the lung, he starts playing, and he just became Josh Allen immediately. He didn't need that time. And so to me, they're the same guy. Big, tall, white dude, long hair, strong arm, can throw the ball out the stadium, accurate, can throw on the move. Like, to me, they're the same players, same strengths, same weaknesses as far as like physicality. Man, they're both really impressive players. The one player who I would say that you didn't mention that I think is very much on the table actually is Joe Burrow. Where last year I
Hmm.
feel like if maybe he put up a little bit better stats, and he put up very good stats last year. If he threw like this year, it wouldn't surprise me if he threw for 5,000 yards and 40 touchdowns. I think we could be looking at Joe Burrow being the MVP of the league. And he's just another one of these young guys in the AFC who is just killing it. So many
Yeah.
young, talented quarterbacks in the AFC. Thinking that Joe Burrow is the fourth best quarterback in the AFC is ridiculous.
Hmm.
Mahomes, Allen, Herbert, and then you got Joe Burrow, and it's like, man, Burrow's really, really, really good, but can you debate he's better than Josh Allen? Eh. Can you debate he's better than Mahomes? Can you debate he's better than Herbert? Eh.
Right.
And he's still incredibly good. I think if you
Yeah.
dropped him in the NFC right now on like the Buccaneers, that they would easily be Super Bowl favorites, or on the Rams. Like him on the Rams right now, I think would be ridiculous. Like you switch Matt Stafford and Joe Burrow in that Super Bowl last year, I think that Joe Burrow wins a Super Bowl. I think he's
Mm-hmm.
that dude. I think that you just build a team around him, the leadership, who he is. And despite all of that, I think that my pick will be Josh Allen as far as like the MVP is a sort of narrative award, it's a stats award. And to me, I feel like Josh Allen right now feels so heralded, feels so, man, he should have been there last year, but Mahomes 13 seconds. And so he has the media and the public love, I think, to where it's setting it up for next year for an MVP. So to me, I feel like my top pick will be Josh Allen, but there are so many good quarterbacks in the league, and I feel like quarterback is the primary position that you'll see MVP. The only other interesting guy that I've heard that's sort of out of the question, but will be really cool, will be like a Justin Jefferson, because man, you never see anybody but a quarterback really win it. And because normally you'd think a wide receiver would never win it, that their quarterback would if they were really good. But Kirk Cousins is never going to win an MVP in this league. Even if Kirk Cousins threw for 6,000 yards and 60 touchdowns, if Justin Jefferson had 2,000 of those yards, Justin Jefferson could be the MVP. And I'm not predicting that, but I heard that up from Mike Florio on Pro Football Talk, and I was like, that's not a terrible pick. Jonathan Taylor with the running backs. But as far as like an under the radar, really like dark horse kind of thing, Justin Jefferson, I think at receiver is the most interesting pick, I would say, outside of the quarterbacks.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a really good transition into offensive player of the year. Because it oddly enough, it seems like the MVP is always for a quarterback, and then the offensive player of the year is always for the best non-quarterback offensive player. And going into this year, I think this is really, really open for anybody. I mean, I think there are a ton of wide receivers that could get this award. I mean, you look at Jamar Chase, you look at Justin Jefferson, you look at Devontae Smith, you look at Jalen Waddle, you look at Tyreek Hill, you look at Nick Chubb, you look at Jonathan Taylor, you look at Derrick Henry, you look at Christian McCaffrey if he has a full season. I mean, it is wide open. But I think that my pick for that, yeah, I think I would go with Jonathan Taylor. I think that he's going to get utilized even more this year in their offense, even though Matt Ryan, even though they brought in Matt Ryan, I feel like they're going to hand the ball off just as much, but it'll be easier for him because there's more concern for defenses about what Matt Ryan can do with the ball, which isn't much, but just goes to show how bad Carson Wentz is. So my pick for offensive player of the year would be Jonathan Taylor, and defensive player of the year, I want to say Myles Garrett because he's my guy, but I mean Micah Parsons just looks like that dude. Like I don't yeah. And I don't think there's much explaining that I have to do with that. So yeah. So hear yours real quick. Your offensive player and defensive player. Who are you thinking?
Man, for me, talking about this with you before the show, we didn't really go over this, but for me, I think it's pretty dang clear too that Jonathan Taylor would be the favorite. Where like quarterbacks have won offensive player of the year before. But if you're talking about the quarterback gets the MVP and a non-quarterback's winning the offensive player of the year, for me, when it comes to running backs and wide receivers, especially running backs, I think youth and health is so important. Where when you see a young guy just starting out, still so much tread on the tires, that you'll see a Christian McCaffrey when he's younger get 1,000 receiving yards, 1,000 rushing yards. You'll see a younger Derrick Henry get 2,000 rushing yards. But then when you get past that, when you get to they've been injured once, they've been injured twice, I just feel that you never really see players post-injury, post those monster years. So I would never bet money as far as Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, even though I think they're two of the most talented, ridiculous in their prime recently running backs that I've ever seen. I think that Jonathan Taylor for the smart money to me would be the best running back who has a shot and who I would probably bet on if I was a betting man. And for me, with wide receiver, I think Cooper Kupp repeating getting like a ridiculous number of yards, maybe Jamar Chase, maybe Justin Jefferson again. I guess Justin Jefferson would be my bet at receiver just because Cooper Kupp got Offensive Player of the Year last year. For me, also, I feel like I just 100% agree with you with defensive player, where Myles Garrett and Micah Parsons just seem like the two guys. Even me as a Steelers fan, TJ Watt worked and grinded so hard for that Defensive Player of the Year that he got last year, and he tied the sack record and should have broke the sack record against the Ravens. But man, there was some questionable stat picking which stat's a sack, which stat isn't if you go back to that game against the Ravens. But man, TJ Watt grinded it out so much for that Defensive Player of the Year. And I feel like he'd need to have like 25 sacks to get Defensive Player of the Year this next year. Like he would have to literally teleport behind offensive linemen and be in a quarterback space every other play, I feel like, to get recognition as Defensive Player of the Year. Myles Garrett, to me, it feels to me also same way with Josh Allen, where it feels like the narrative and what the media would be saying during the season, it feels to me like it would be Myles Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Micah Parsons is ridiculous. He's a linebacker and an edge rusher at the highest levels of both rolled into one. Like there's nobody who's elite at both positions like Micah Parsons. There's no linebacker that can line up and get past a offensive tackle like him. And there's nobody who plays linebacker, nobody who rushes the passer, who can run down Justin Herbert from across the field and run him out of bounds, strip sack, or anything like that. But man, I 100% agree with you with your offensive player and defensive player picks. We got to speed it up a little bit because your computer is dying, you were saying. But as far as offensive and defensive rookie, just a little rapid fire there.
Yeah. Defensive rookie of the year, I'm going with Aiden Hutchinson. I don't think that that's an outlandish pick, and yeah, I think always with the rookie of the year ones with predictions, it's always the same thing. Like they just have so much upside, so I feel like they speak for themselves. So Aiden Hutchinson, and then offensive rookie of the year is honestly, I feel like that's a pretty tough one this year. It's gonna be interesting to see what the offensive players do. Normally, especially the offensive rookie of the year tends to go to a quarterback. But the only quarterback that I'm seeing that would maybe do it would be Kenny Pickett, but I don't think he's going to play enough games.
I agree.
So I'm gonna go out on a limb here, but I'm gonna say Chris Olave. I think that
Ooh, I like it.
I think that he's gonna have a Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase-esque rookie season in New Orleans that's going to be hard to overlook. So
definitely Chris Olave is somebody who I think could easily crack 1,000 yards as a rookie. Aiden Hutchinson, to me, pretty square there. I think he's just a great edge rusher, great all-around presence, great guy. For me, the other guy that, man, seeing him in the preseason, George Karlaftis on the Chiefs, to me, he's the real deal. Coming out of college, to me, he looked a little bit like a little slower-footed, but J.J. Watt, where like big, strong, bulky, wide shoulders, and can just play three tech and run offensive linemen back into the quarterback. I am not saying he's going to be J.J. Watt, but I think he's just one of those guys that can just rush the passer and just push the pocket. And so I'd say look out for him. He's going to have an impactful rookie year. Offensive rookie of the year, man, it's up in the air for me. Under the radar, Dameon Pierce. Again, you and I have talked about him. We love him. I drafted him in all three of the fantasy leagues. I drafted him in all of them. But man, the Texans, I don't know about that. For me at receiver, I think Drake London is going to be a legit baller, where I didn't love him coming out of college because he doesn't separate well. But he's one of those guys, Chase Claypool-ish, where just high points the ball and is just dominant at the catch point. Strong hands and just rip it down. And I think Marcus Mariota with like zero run game. Their running backs are horrendous, in my opinion. Is just going to be throwing Kyle Pitts and Drake London. Kyle Pitts, Drake London. It's just going to be those two guys. That offense is
Yep.
going to be just throwing to those guys. So Drake London to me will be the most interesting guy with Offensive Player of the Year. For you to wrap it up, we got Coach of the Year and we got Comeback Player of the Year.
Yeah. My Coach of the Year, I'm going to go with Brandon Staley. I think that the Chargers are poised to have a really, really good season, a surprising season, though everybody's acting like that's the season they're going to have. But still, the Coach of the Year award doesn't tend to go to, the guy that, gets their team, like all the way to the, number one seed and stuff like that, because those coaches tend to be guys that are already around there anyway. So I think I can see Staley, guiding Herbert and leading the Chargers to a really good record where, even if they make the playoffs as a wild card they could do that at 12-5 because of how loaded that division is, and could win it, similar to how Kevin Stefanski won it a couple years back when the Browns went 11-5 and made the wild card. So he's my pick for Coach of the Year. Comeback Player of the Year is always weird to me because sometimes it's not a significant comeback. Sometimes it's insanely significant comeback. So we've had like Alex Smith, who in my opinion they should name the Comeback Player of the Year award the Alex Smith Comeback Player of the Year,
100%,
right?
100%.
But then we have like hypothetically Christian McCaffrey could win it this year, right? I think my pick would be CMC if he plays a full year. Just the fact that he'd play a full year alone, I think would speak wonders. Just because of how injury prone he's been. I could see Saquon Barkley as well, and he's got a lot of motivation in a contract year, and not just in a contract year with the Giants, but if the Giants let him go, he still wants to get his money elsewhere. And you got to prove that you can stay healthy and perform at a high level when you are healthy to do it. And I could see that being serious motivation for him. So
definitely, I would say that for Coach of the Year, I think a guy that I don't love as a coach, but I think the team could play their way into him being Coach of the Year will be the Eagles. I think Nick Sirianni clearly has shown that he knows somewhat how to coach, even though his press conferences are a little bit wacky and some of his decisions are a little weird. But he knew our offensive line's great. Let's figure out how to run the ball down people's throats. And they did it by the end of the year and did a great job. And I think that the Eagles are going to win that division and that they're going to play really well this year. So I could see that as far as when you're not looking at the Andy Reid, Sean McDermott's, the obvious guys. And to me, I feel like none of the obvious guys really get it because, like, Belichick's maybe got one or two coaches of the year, and he's the best coach ever. So to me, Coach of the Year isn't always the best coach, but it's who really elevates their team in that way. So I guess I'll go with Nick Sirianni, not confidently, but I think that the team could play their way into that. And for me, I would say Comeback Player of the Year. Let me just pose this little question to you. If the Panthers have a winning record, or at least are an interesting offense, and Baker and CMC play really well, who are they giving this award to? If you see like Baker throw for 4,000 or 4,500 yards and play quite well, and CMC rush and receive for a combo of like 1,600 yards, who's getting that award? Because both of those guys had really down, really injured, really low points last year. And if they followed it up with a really interesting offensive like season this year, who do you see breaking that tie? Because to me, I feel like the narrative with Baker could be really cool, especially the week one matchup against the Browns. That feels like such a fun matchup to me, where if Baker wins, Baker beating the Browns could be such a cool little mini week one story, where if you just look at that, what are you thinking with that? Because to me, Baker will be an awesome Comeback Player of the Year.
Yeah, I think if there had to be a tiebreaker, I think it would go to Christian McCaffrey, because there's a difference between being injured and not being on the field. and being injured and forcing yourself to stay on the field and playing poorly. I think one of the things that made the the last straw with the Browns and with Baker not only was the questionable locker room issues, but
Mhm.
also like we want to be able to make the excuse that you were hurt and that's why you didn't play well, but at the same time you insisted that you were good enough to play. So, so there's that weird like balance of, well, he was injured, he kept playing anyway, so obviously he wasn't we shouldn't like we have to, it has to be measured with a grain of salt, right?
Mhm.
So I think if there was that, I think you make a great point and I could totally see that, but I think
Mhm.
I think that in that situation it would go to CMC.
I got you. Yeah. Any final closing words for you before we wrap up? Just so
Yeah.
much looking forward to football, though, man.
Yeah, I am really excited for this Browns Panthers game. I'd be shocked if it isn't just like the main 1 o'clock game that is on everywhere because of the storylines that's coming with it.
Mhm.
Uh, I appreciate Stefanski and the Browns are treating it like professionals, whereas from what
Mhm.
we've heard from Baker so far in the last week or so, he is not treating it like a professional.
Oh man.
So, but I know that I can think about guys like Clowney and Garrett and JOK, not being able to tear this dude limb for limb in practice. But if all of this locker room stuff is
Yeah.
true, definitely wanting to and finally getting that shot.
Mhm.
Um, I look at the games in the last few years where Baker's been like, no, like it's my time to like prove myself, and he never plays well in those games. He gets too much in his own head. So I don't. I mean, I expect it to be a fun game. I don't expect it to be a good game.
Yeah.
um,
Week one, I'm
but
gonna have Bengals Steelers right in front of me, and then Browns Panthers is that second watching out of the corner of my eye game. There are gonna be some fun 10 o'clock games, man.
absolutely, absolutely, man.
Mhm.
Well, everybody, thank you so much for
Mhm.
watching and for listening. Hope everybody enjoys. Yeah, week one, here we are. We're finally here. Everybody's so giddy about it. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching and for listening, and thank you all so much for the support. And yeah, peace out, everybody.
Yep. Peace out. Have a great night.